Thank you, and welcome to Land and Property Focus once again. If you have liked our Facebook page, then please do share as well and let everybody know that we are live and having a very important discussion today. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. My name is Nana Texan. Today we have a very important conversation to have concerning land in Ghana, particularly as it relates to acquisition by non-citizens. And I tell you why this is important. I have watched in the last couple of weeks some YouTube videos that point out to the type of interest that non-citizens can acquire in Ghana. And thinking through some of these together with, I saw a YouTube video, for instance, where 5,000 acres of land was offered somewhere in Asebu for free for non-citizens. It is clear that the law is there and non-citizens can acquire land in Ghana. But it appears that there are some bottlenecks or there are some issues that non-citizens have to be aware of, or I guess citizens as well selling the lands have to be aware of. So it is very right that we discuss this topic today, especially in light of the fame that Ghana has acquired through the year of return and all the drive to bring people of the African diaspora back to Ghana. I would move on now to look at the law which I've selected today and which would obviously tie in with the discussion that we are having today. So you're either a citizen or you're a non-citizen. And in terms of citizenship, I have taken the part of the Citizenship Act 2000, Act 591. Part 1 looks as existing and citizenship by birth. By existing, we are looking at citizenship that was already in place before the 1992 Constitution. And then I am also, it is also looking at citizenship through birth by parent or grandparent in or outside Ghana, and also citizenship which foundlings can actually obtain. We also have part 2, which deals with citizenship other than through birth. And these are 3, according to the law, through adoption, registration, and naturalization. Of course, if you do not qualify through any of these, then it appears to me that you're more in the class of non-citizens, and therefore today's discussion perhaps will be very beneficial to you. I would now bring on my guest for today. Now, my guest for today is Paa Kwesi Hagan, as you may have seen through the flyers for the event. Paa Kwesi is the managing partner of Globetrotters Legal. That's a mouthful, but I manage that. Globetrotters Legal, which is one of the leading immigration law firms in Ghana. In fact, Globetrotters is, I think, just one of a few that practice in this area of law in Ghana. And I think it will be helpful, being that he deals with a lot of non-citizens, to guide us through this discussion. Welcome, Mr. Hagan.
Thank you, Nana. I'm happy to be here on the show.
Okay. So just to give a sort of historical background to those who are watching us, before 1969, non-citizens appear to have been able to acquire any type of interest in land in Ghana. Now, the 1969 Constitution was the first of our laws that came in to change that. The Constitution required that a non-citizen could only acquire a 50-year interest in land. And the wording was an interest which is 50 years at any one time. Now, the law then had to deal with those non-citizens who had acquired that interest before 1969. So we had 2 routes. If you owned freehold, it gave you the right for a 50-year lease. And after the 50-year lease, the provision was for the reversion to come to the state. If you owned a leasehold interest as of 1969, then the reversion was to revert to whoever your landlord was. Now, fast forward the 1992 Constitution, which brought our fourth Republican dispensation. The same provisions in the 1969 Constitution was repeated. And so we have had that, and it is very clear that non-citizens could only acquire land for 50 years at any one time. Fast forward 2020, we had the Land Act 2020. The Land Act, which had been a couple of years in the making, consolidated a lot of our land laws and improved them. So in relation to the acquisition of land by non-citizens specifically, there were 4 changes which I can see. One was that if a non-citizen married a Ghanaian, it did not change his designation or her designation as a non-citizen. The second one was that if they formed a partnership, it did not change their designation. The third was that if they formed a company and owned more than 40% of the shares in that company, then they still would not, that company was still not going to be classed as a citizen for the purposes of the Act. Then I guess the improvement on the position in 1969 and 1992 was the inclusion of the fact that when a non-citizen acquires land, and if between the two parties, the buyer and the seller, it is agreed, the non-citizen could, or the drafting could allow for a renewal of the lease. So I would say that it had been strict prior to 2020 for a non-citizen to only acquire land, which was up to 50 years. But the Land Act now allows you to renew if that is the agreement between you and your landlord. So that is a historical perspective, which I think in discussing these issues, we must all have cognizance of. Because I've heard a lot of references to the fact that, you know, non-citizens can buy freehold, non-citizens should negotiate for more number of years. In fact, the law provides that any such agreement, especially for freehold, is void. And what you don't want is to put money into an investment and end up having issues because the law does not recognize the agreement you've entered into. So that is just a nutshell of where we are now as a nation in terms of the law for non-citizens. But we do appreciate that if a non-citizen must come into Ghana or has to come into Ghana, they either need a visa or some sort of permit. And I think that is where Mr. Hagan here would be best to guide us so that we can look at those individual routes of entry and how they may have effect on land acquisition or not. So, Mr. Hagan, can you, briefly talk us through how non-citizens could come through Ghana? I guess we're looking at the visas. We are looking at those who have exemptions, whether through the ECOWAS protocol or through bilateral arrangements. And we're also looking at your residence permits and all that. If you can briefly touch on those for us.
Thank you, Nana. So, as you rightly said, I'll look at it in 2 different phases. I'll look at it as first, permissions that allow on a temporary basis for non-citizen to come to Ghana, and the permanent ones. So for the temporary ones, you're looking at for every foreigner who is either who is not visa exempt, right? Yeah. They would require a visa to come to Ghana. This visa may be obtained from a Ghanaian consulate abroad, or where circumstances permit, they may obtain an emergency visa on arrival at the airport. Now, the types of visas that typically visitors would acquire is the B2 visa, which is the tourist visa or the holiday visa. For persons that are coming to Ghana on business, they would obtain a B1 visa. A student permit for persons that are coming to Ghana for purposes of study, that will also go for those. For the visa exempt groups, you have the ECOWAS bloc. ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States, a regional grouping of 15 West African states who do not require a visa to enter Ghana and may stay for a period up to about 90 days.
Yeah.
On the African continent, there are other countries that also do not require visas. Botswana, Zimbabwe, Uganda, and a few others. You'd also have, certain types of persons with diplomatic status not requiring visas to come to Ghana anyway. So those are the temporary ones. And for the purpose of coming to Ghana, if the traveler is coming to Ghana for, say, work purposes, in addition to those entry visas that grants them permission to enter Ghana, they'll be required to obtain work and residence permits on the status as non-citizens coming to Ghana to undertake work activities. So those I would group as the temporary ones, and then the permanent ones for our purposes would be those that are on indefinite residence permits, those who are married to Ghanaians and have obtained their statuses accordingly. We're actually looking at, and these dependents of those who married to Ghanaians are entitled to dependent residence permits whilst they are here. Right of abode, persons can also be said to be permanent residents, and foreigners who subsequently get naturalized as well will form the group in the permanent category here. So Nana, those are the two, for purpose of the discussion.
So thank you very much for capturing these. So when you look at because I have been that I moonlight as a representative of Ghana abroad, is it like you have people who have like visitors visas, and then they come into Ghana and they acquire property? There's nothing in the law readily that points out to me that it's against that practice, or any of the temporal visas, come through the ECOWAS protocol, or, be a Botswana citizen, can enter Ghana. What are the practical difficulties for people in that temporal category if they do acquire land?
Okay, so first of all, you as you said in your synopsis, the interest will be limited to the 50-year per the law. So those persons that do come in on visitors visas, yes, they could acquire land if they so desire. For those that are on, I would say, temporary status, visitors visa for a month or two, they can still acquire the visa. But the practical limitation you're looking at is, if your intention is to come and reside in Ghana by purchasing the property, you may have a challenge because your visit to Ghana is tied to the duration of stay that is granted to you at the airport. So strictly speaking, yes, you have acquired a property, but that does not give you an indefinite right to be living in Ghana, basically. So once your visa expires, you may have to leave. Now, for the for the person that's an investor, so to speak, the duration of the visa in itself does not restrict his ability to own and invest in properties. Basically, once he has acquired this property and he's not in Ghana, he's at liberty to lease the property, invest, make money out of the property, so there's a continuity there, even though you may not be physically present in Ghana. So those are, I think, the practical challenges that, someone who is just here on a short-term visit and intends to live and reside here in the property that they have purchased, so to speak, would face. But if it is not for the purposes of living in, then you can still go about your investment in the property and be outside and still enjoy the benefits of same.
Okay, thank you very much. I hear that we are having a feedback sound I don't know if it's any better now. Mr. Hagan, do you have a second mic turned on your side?
No, I don't.
Okay, all right.
Is it now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
So I guess my next question then would be on the issue of it would be on the issue of those who are in the kind of intermediate category. Those who are actually going to have or able to get a right of abode, or the right of abode, or the leave to remain, the permanent leave to remain. How different are those from the others?
Sorry, Dana, I think I lost you at the end. Can you repeat the question again?
Okay,
Thank you.
so how different? Because we've treated the first kind of temporal group, and then you also told us about those who are in the kind of right of abode category, those who are married and have residence permits. How different do you see the rights or the acquisition of those in the second group in getting land?
Okay, so the second group also have the same rights to acquire the land as the temporary group. They would not particularly face any additional challenges with respect to the acquisition, obviously subject to what the law allows them to hold. They will be permitted to hold such land. Yes, because they are more or less permanent in Ghana, they may be able to go about doing a lot more with the land than if they were outside. They can, they can choose to rent it, develop it, and basically until their permissions expire in respect of the duration, seek, extensions of it as well. So for them, they would not particularly, be disadvantaged. They are permitted to hold lands.
Okay. Thank you very much. So essentially, the difference between the two classes is that obviously one is temporary and therefore may potentially create problems depending on the type of kind of thought is behind the purchase of the land in Ghana. And then of course, the second group, being that they've got roots or they've got rights to be in Ghana, I guess are in a different category. So that's essentially what you're saying. So I know that non-citizens as well are able to come to Ghana and purchase land and sometimes form companies. And we know what the Land Act says in terms of company shares. But in terms of forming companies, perhaps investing through the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, GIPC, and then also through the Free Zones Board. What is the situation there, and what opportunities, or what are the opportunities or the problems with that mode of entry into Ghana by a non-citizen?
Okay, just to give a little perspective to the two agencies that you've mentioned, the GIPC, which is the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, is it's an investment arm under the Office of the Presidency, and by law, all companies that have a non-citizen participating in is required to register with the GIPC as well. Yeah. So for starters, they would set up the entity at the Registrar General's Department. And once that is done, they will proceed to register the company with GIPC. Now, registration with GIPC comes with obvious benefits, including the right to have some sort of permanency to your stay. The GIPC regime grants automatic immigrant quotas, which are more or less like indefinite work and residence work permit slots for anybody that gets put on by the company. So through this route, a non-citizen may enter Ghana, proceed to give the requisite investment that GIPC requires, because the registration itself requires that if you are setting up a fully foreign-owned entity, and that's a description that GIPC provides in the Act, you have to contribute a minimum of $500,000. If it's a joint venture with a Ghanaian entity or Ghanaian person, you are looking at a minimum of $200,000 for the foreigner or the non-citizen in this particular case. Yeah. And in the case of companies that intend to undertake trading activities, the minimum threshold is $1 million. So depending on which of the options you look at, it then determines what capital you bring in. So once you come in and you are, let's say, a beneficiary of the automatic immigrant quota, you then have some sort of permanency in terms of your stay here. You can proceed to buy land, in respect of your investment. And in actual fact, once the investment is received, proceeds that have been received and recognized as investment may be used to acquire property, once you are here. And that's the GIPC regime. Now, with respect to the free zones, a little background as well. Free zone entities basically, for illustration purposes, say a company plans to export 90% of its proceeds, or of its manufacturers,
Yeah.
they qualify to be in the free zones. Now, this free zone regime allows companies, by facilitating their investment in Ghana, assisting them with all their permissions to be here, including acquisition of land. So persons that have set up entities and registered in the free zones are able to buy land as well from the free zones authority, and then they can go about their business and their investment.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So I guess the acquisition through the Free Zones Board or the GIPC, and then even in setting up a company is seen in the light of the restrictions of the land law. And I think perhaps what we may have to say is that even though different laws in the country might provide for entry or rights of citizenship, well, beside the right of citizenship, the Land Act should be seen specifically as the act or the law that governs land. So if you do want to acquire land, then that is your number one shop to go to. So you can't set up a company and then it would still not give you that right if you do not actually meet the threshold that the Land Act actually covers. Is that, do you agree with that summary?
Yes, actually, you're right. As the Land Act is the operative act in terms of property acquisition, the dictates of the setup of, or the recognition of a setup as a non-citizen or citizen is critical in acquiring the land or property that the investor intends to acquire. So that is spot on. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I guess for those watching us, I think we've had some problem with our mics and speakers with the feedback coming through. I hope that some of the information is actually getting through to you. I'll try and work through a solution, hopefully, when the questions do come through. But essentially, we have stated the position of the law when it comes to a non-citizen and what you can acquire. So we have to be careful if people are offering us land, for instance, freehold, or saying that you can acquire land for more than 50 years if you're a non-citizen. And as well, if you are somebody who is entering Ghana on a visitor's visa or a visa which is temporary, you have to evaluate what you actually you want to do with the property. If it is such that you're not going to be able to come into Ghana if that visa is either withdrawn or something happens, then you have to actually see what advantages it offers you. There is obviously the permanent class, there is those who get married, and I think a point which we didn't cover was, it appears to me that if you're married to a Ghanaian as a non-citizen, even though you cannot acquire land in your name, your partner, your wife, or your husband is able to acquire that land. And the Land Act then requires that if you're married and you acquire land in your sole name, your partner actually has a beneficial interest of 50% of that property. So I guess as a non-citizen who is married to a Ghanaian, that is a route which you can look at. You may not have your name on the document, but once your wife or your husband buys it, the Land Act says that you own 50%. So you can look at it from that angle. And then we have also looked at the situation where you either set up a company or you register through the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, or you go through the free zones route. So this is a snapshot of where we are at, or how we see things, the difficulties that you may face. And so we would welcome your questions so that we can answer them. Before we go to the questions, please make sure to like our Facebook page and follow the page as well. If you've done so already, thank you very much, and keep sharing. If you haven't, please make sure you do so whilst we go through the questions. As well, you can do the same thing on on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel. We now have a WhatsApp number. So for those of you who don't have Facebook accounts or YouTube accounts and may not be able to send your questions through those media, you can send us a WhatsApp message, and I would put the WhatsApp number on the screen now. So you can send us a WhatsApp message, and then we'll take your questions from there. I would now go on to questions that I have received on WhatsApp. So, Mr. Hagan, one question is, I am a British and my parents are Ghanaian, but I don't have a Ghanaian passport. Can I buy land as a citizen or a non-citizen?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, Nana?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Yes, I switched to an earpiece to try and help the echo issue. So yes, for the Ghanaian who doesn't have a Ghanaian passport but has a British passport, question is, if I got it correctly, would he or she be categorized as a Ghanaian or non-citizen for the purposes of purchasing land? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. So citizenship, by the Citizenship Act, clearly states who a Ghanaian is. It actually says if one of your parents or one of your grandparents is Ghanaian, you are Ghanaian. So the fact that you do not have a Ghanaian passport does not mean that you are not a Ghanaian. I mean, there's a case law that have, more or less reiterated that fact, even in the case of dual citizens, that the holding or the acquisition of a Ghanaian passport or the dual citizenship card does not confer citizenship on you. In actual fact, the Citizenship Act does it. So by virtue of you tracing your Ghanaianness from your parent or grandparent, once that is established, you would enjoy the same rights as any Ghanaian who holds a Ghanaian passport, because you are Ghanaian even without the passport. So therefore, you can, to be specific, you can hold, a leasehold for longer than the 50 years that the non-citizenship restriction covers in the Constitution.
Okay, so I guess just to add a little bit to what you have said, I mean, there are many people in Ghana itself who don't have passports. So the passports themselves do not prove that you are a Ghanaian. But then you would have to prove, I guess, the citizenship of your parents. So that would be the only test if you were ever questioned about it in terms of that. Perhaps I must add this, and Lawyer Hagan, help me with this if possible. Now, it is not the provision that non-citizens actually can acquire only 50-year interest in land is actually not negative at all, because it appears to me that a lot of the land that is now being offered, even for citizens, is on 50-year basis. And therefore, the non-citizens, if they ever felt that the 50-year restriction, because obviously from outside of Ghana, the concept of buying freehold land or buying very long leases is known to a lot of people. And therefore, when they see that this is a 50-year lease, they might think that it's actually a disadvantage, or they're being given a kind of a lesser interest in land. But I don't know what your thought is on this. It's now there's a lot of evidence that even citizens are being offered only 50-year leases.
Yeah, I mean that's indeed the case. Yes, so it shouldn't be seen as a negative, especially where the New Land Act actually makes provision for a renewal of even the 50 years at the time of agreeing. I mean, once you are negotiating your initial 50, you can actually negotiate on the conditions and terms and conditions of the subsequent renewal after expiry. So strictly speaking, yes, restriction of 50, but it doesn't leave you hanging after 50 years. You can still extend. And I agree that yes, a lot of Ghanaians now are having 50-year leases and the like. So it's, for me, it's not evidence of one group of people not being able to more or less benefit, from the benefit, or take advantage of the benefits of acquiring land.
Okay. I would go on to Facebook and YouTube. So I have a comment from Krabai Concept, who says, "We appreciate all you do. Thank you." And then Hansen says the sound. So I got a couple of comments from Hansen and Regina Ferguson, as well as Natalie Apiajumo and Mohammed Kataba, on the sound quality issue. It appears to have solved itself, thank God. These are some of the things you go through with the IT. So thank you very much for your feedback, and I am pleased that it has been solved now. And then we have a comment from Opoman Ghana, says, "Thank for the information." And then another comment from Peter King Ofori, says, "Good info, we need this one." And then I have Jag myself Small, who says, "Nana, thanks for the educative program, kudos." Then there's a question from Peter King Ofori, says, "If I acquire a land as a foreigner and I acquire citizenship during the 50 years, can I change my lease to reflect my citizenship?" Why didn't I see this coming? Mr. Hagan, do you want to deal with it, or do you want me to deal with it?
I mean, I can comment
Okay.
on it. So as you become a Ghanaian, you'll be entitled to all the rights and privileges of being a Ghanaian, including having to overcome that restriction of your 50-year lease as captured in the Constitution. So it shouldn't be too much of a problem once you can prove that you become a Ghanaian, and in your extension or your request, you can put that in the application, and that should be able to get you what you deserve.
Yeah. Okay, so I think if I can get Mr. Ofori he is talking about during the pendency of the lease, and I've had this question before. So if you have a, say, 50-year lease starting from 2021, and then in 2030 you're a non-citizen today, in 2030 you're a citizen. Unfortunately, the lease would have started. So your only option is to go back to your landlord and arrange a surrender and renewal. So you can surrender whatever is left of your existing lease and renew for a new term. Now, because you're renewing at that point, being that you're a Ghanaian citizen, you actually qualify for whatever a Ghanaian citizen qualifies for. But if today you buy land which is 50 years as a non-citizen, you can't turn up to your landlord in year 10 and say, "Hello, I'm now a citizen, so you have to change it." That's because your agreement is almost like is stuck up until the end of that lease. Of course, when it comes to the question of renewal and you are a citizen, then you can argue that, okay, I'm now a citizen and therefore I benefit from citizen rights to renewal as opposed to non-citizen rights to renewal.
Yes, that's correct. And just to add to that as well, if in instances where if your landlord is the Lands Commission, the approach you suggested works perfectly. You can approach them, surrender the remainder of your interest, and then request for a new one, which would reflect your new status.
Okay. So I've got a comment from Edinkra Photography, says, "Thank you, very informative discussion." And then Natalie Apia-Jumo says, "Good question, Peter Ofori." Kwame Opoku Adu says, "Great info, Nana and Paa Kwesi. This is very much needed for those in the diaspora who want to acquire land. Thank you, guys." Papa Toro says, "I once told my TDC, which I believe is Tema Development Corporation or company, is one of them, that once you hold a non-Ghanaian passport, then your lease agreement is automatically 60 years. Can you clarify this, and which part of the law to refer to tackle TDC?" Okay, so if I can get the question well, TDC or somebody in TDC, and obviously we can't take it as fact, but that's a question that has come, that if you hold a non-Ghanaian passport, then you have an automatic agreement for a 60-year lease.
Okay, so just to comment on that, so I'll take the first one on the 60-year lease,
Yeah.
right? If by the comment, TDC was saying that for a non-citizen, you were entitled to 60 years, I think that may not entirely be, reflective of what is stated in the law, because even for a non-citizen, you're looking at 50 years lease, and it's by law. That's one. And secondly, I also do not agree that a holder of the foreign passport takes away, the fact that you're Ghanaian.
Just to cut you short, I've had just an update to that comment, and he's saying 50 years now, and not 60 years. So I guess it changes the conversation.
That's fine. So that the first part, is resolved. So the second part is that the fact that you hold a non-Ghanaian passport means that you are not a Ghanaian, basically. That's what I get from the comment, which is also not the case, because as I earlier mentioned, you are a Ghanaian once you satisfy the conditions of the law. If it's true birth or descent, you are a Ghanaian if your parent or grandparent is Ghanaian. That's what makes you Ghanaian, and not the passport that you hold. The passport only helps in facilitating certain aspects of you being a Ghanaian, but it doesn't make you a Ghanaian. And in lay terms, that's the best I can explain. So the position that, so far as you hold a foreign passport, you do not, get to be Ghanaian. For me, it's a little problematic, because you can always establish your status through other means than holding a passport.
A passport. Okay. Thank you. So I've got a question here which says, and I don't know says, if you want to buy land in Ghana, do you have to be a citizen for a certain amount of time? That's from Alma Dorothy Texan. Do you need to be a citizen for a certain amount of time, Mr. Hagan?
Oh, my quick answer is that if you're a citizen day one, I'm sure day two you can buy land as a citizen. There's no time, there's no cooling off period, so to speak, when you become a citizen.
So once you're a citizen, So Alma, that is your answer there. I've got another question on WhatsApp, which says, if I pay for a 50-year lease today, do I have to pay again when the lease comes up to renewal?
Okay, so this question is an interesting one, and it's interesting because even before this program, I was telling you that I had a similar case of a client that came up with that. So the truth of the matter is, at the time of negotiation, right, you get the opportunity to negotiate the terms of the renewal, right? There's an erroneous point that people make, that once you are paying for a 50-year lease, you more or less don't have to pay anything else. In simple terms, what you're buying or what you're paying for is the 50-year lease, and that's it. So once the 50-year lease expires, you may be required, subject to what negotiations that you've done prior to this time, to make some payments, in respect of the land. What I've seen being done in practice is that at the time of the negotiation, you may come to a compromise as to an applicable percentage of increase, in order to not to leave the termination of the renewal to market forces, basically, such that if you bought this property for, say, 50,000 CDs or 100,000 CDs, it could be valued at maybe 5-10 times, depending on the economic factors that the country goes in the next 50 years. Basically, so you could be worse off if we leave it to market forces. Some people are usually prudent enough to try and negotiate in the agreement a pack, a percentage beyond which, for lack of a better term, repurchase or renewal would not go beyond. And that's a way that people have practically resolved that issue. But yes, you would have to pay again, so to speak. It is not a one-off payment that does not end after your expiry. It will definitely come at the end of expiry. But the good thing is that you are guaranteed an opportunity to extend or renew even if you are a non-citizen. It is not automatic. It has to be negotiated and agreed upon. And then once that, and the difference between that and the Ghanaian acquiring or extending the lease is that the Ghanaian has a right to an automatic renewal, but the foreigner doesn't have a right to automatic, but it has to be negotiated, including the terms and conditions all captured in the agreement.
Okay, so I guess putting my surveyor's hat on, it depends on who you're advising. If I was advising the landlord, I would tell them, of course, to make sure that they make the renewal subject to existing rules at the time. Because if anybody, and I've heard the references to the fact that what if I pay more today? Now, if you pay more today, obviously time value of money comes in, and therefore presumably the landlord should be able to invest and get some amount of money at the end of the 50 years or whatever term you've given. And this applies to both citizens and non-citizens. But if you're advising obviously the tenant or the person acquiring the land, then they would want as much certainty as they can get. And it's not always easy, especially as normally you're going to buy bare land. And after you bought bare land, you're going to build on it. So the factor of valuation also has to look at whether you are including the buildings, because technically, at the end of your lease, the building and the land belongs to the landlord. The landlord may decide to make allowance for the buildings that you put on there because you put it in, but in law, you don't own anything on that land. So the landlord can technically rentalize your building which you have constructed, as well as the land that they sold you. So these are kind of practical questions and things that I guess as a nation, because leaseholds are now the primary modes through which we sell, we would have to have a consideration for, because there are questions that will repeatedly come up along the line. Papa Toro says, I think in following on his first earlier question, says, even though I'm a full organic Ghanaian, and I was asked to, I don't know what that means to be a full organic Ghanaian anyway, but I think we get the inference. And I was asked to provide my Ghanaian passport before they agree to 99 years. I don't know why that happened, but obviously that is not right. He is a Ghanaian, and if he is a Ghanaian, then he should qualify to purchase whatever they are selling, unless perhaps he didn't speak nicely to somebody and they decided to, just play games with him. But what do you think, Mr. Hagan?
I actually think that these are things that can be looked into. If this person was my client and was informed this, I definitely know what steps to take to demonstrate to the authorities that, for all intents and purposes, he's Ghanaian and entitled to all the benefits that he's supposed to have, irrespective of the fact that he doesn't have a Ghanaian passport, which he can acquire anyway. So, because even a position of a passport, just to make a point, just to say that, it shouldn't even be a criteria. If you go to the passport office now and you want to acquire a passport, the things that they will ask you is, do you have proof that to your Ghanaian birth certificate or the birth certificate of a parent, right? So you may even be born outside of Ghana, right? But you still have the benefit of getting the passport if you're able to demonstrate what the law says. Either the birth certificate of your parent or your grandparent. That gets you the passport. So if you're able to prove this, I don't think that it is, it lies in the mouth of the officer who is requesting for you to show a Ghanaian passport to say you are not Ghanaian.
Okay.
That doesn't give you, it doesn't confer, because it can confer citizenship on you. You're Ghanaian because the law says you're Ghanaian by those requirements of the law.
Okay, so Papa Toro, this is what Mr. Hagan is saying. I think if you do need to contact him, then perhaps he would help you if indeed that issue is still something that is still running. I've got comments from Michael Adumwa And then Kimani Ngugi saying very informative. Thank you very much for watching the show, and we appreciate you. I have a question again from WhatsApp, which is, can citizens acquire freeholds? If not, why not? Okay. Mr. Hagan.
Yes. So I think prior to the new Land Act,
Yeah.
there were certain categories of sellers, specifically respective family lands, where a person could have acquired a freehold interest. But with the coming into force of the Land Act 2020, 1036, Act 1036, you are restricted. More or less, the definition now extends to a restriction on families granting freehold as well. So if you ask me, since the coming into force of this law, it will be difficult, well, not difficult, impossible, because once you have it, it may be voided. So, it's difficult to get, it will be difficult to get a freehold interest from a family. However, you may get a freehold interest if you are acquiring from an individual that owns the freehold. So the restrictions in the law, talks about stools, skin, clans, and families, right? It conveniently leaves out individuals. Therefore, if you are acquiring your freehold as a Ghanaian from an individual holder of a freehold interest, you can acquire a freehold. But if you are getting it from a family, who previously would have been able to give freehold interest, to you, by this law, they cannot. I hope the distinction is fair.
Okay. So I guess as well, in following with your response, and perhaps because we would have some non-citizens listening, it pays to just give a background as to why land in Ghana is now only being sold leasehold. So we have, over the generations, or traditionally held land to belong to those who are living, those who are dead, and those yet unborn. And therefore, whoever has a right to sell land now, be it a chief or a head of family, is only doing it as a custodian or as a trustee on behalf of the larger family or the stool or the town over which the chief actually presides. And therefore, we have had this conversation over the years, right up from 1910 West African Land Tenure Commission, where a Nigerian chief actually made this principle known as a West African practice of land law. We have felt, and I think we have felt that land should not be sold absolutely. When you sell freehold, for instance, and you are the chief or you are the family head, what you actually do is that you deprive your family or your community forever. And I have given this example before, where the British acquired Hong Kong on a 99-year lease. And therefore, in 1997, they had to hand it back. Now, imagine if they had acquired it as a freehold. However they acquired it, it would have had a British territory near to China. And in the current geopolitics, perhaps it may not have been the best. So for us, this whole thing, which affects the citizens and the non-citizens, is just seen in the culture that we have actually had and how we hold land. Land is not for us to sell. Land is for us to benefit off and pass it on to other generations. So when you are a chief or the head of a family, you should be able to eat or feed yourself off the land, but you don't have the right to sell absolutely. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Hagan?
Yeah, just to add to that, and as you rightly said earlier, now the Ghanaians are also getting 50-year leases in the leasehold. So it looks like the distinction is becoming blurred now, because if in the past there was a whole lot of freehold going to Ghanaians, and the law now restricts them from getting freehold, to the extent of the past, then strictly speaking, it's just a question of how many years you're getting on a lease. But in terms of the interest you're getting, it's gradually becoming all leaseholds. And when you sink that into the philosophical context that you have given, it then makes sense, So I think it's a positive step, looking at it on how we see land as for people yet unborn as well. So, children yet unborn. So I think it's welcome news, and it should not limit anybody from acquiring land, because basically you have a right to renew and extend anyway. It's just that it's not absolute.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question on WhatsApp from what appears to be Torah for Life. And the question is, as a non-citizen living in Ghana and starting a new company, 100% foreign, what does the GIPC require as proof of 500K? Is it cash, bank statements, receipts for land purchases, any capital investment in Ghana, or a combination of all?
Okay, so for GIPC purposes, the equity or capital required to be invested in your entity must be capital that is coming from outside if you're a non-citizen. So if you are a non-citizen and you've been in Ghana and you've earned funds in Ghana through other means, unfortunately, that fund would not be categorized as forming part of the equity that you need to satisfy in terms of setting up, a fully foreign-owned company. So that 500K has to either come from outside Ghana in the form of cash through the Ghana banking system, and it must be designated as, the purpose being for investment. So to give you an example, you can be a non-citizen and send money to Ghana for whatever purpose, right? It will not be considered as equity if you are not sending it for the purpose of that investment. So you can buy land, you can buy anything, but GIPC will not recognize that as your equity contribution unless it goes through the Ghana banking system and proof obtained from your bankers. So in actual fact, once the money hits your local bank, so it presupposes that you set up the entity, you open a bank account, right? You wire the foreign equity through the account. Your bankers would write to Bank of Ghana for confirmation that these funds have been, credited to your account and converted to cedis. That's something that people miss. So not only do you have the hard foreign currency in the account, but it has to be converted to cedis. And I think the rationale is that when it's there in hard currency, you can always take it back. But when you convert it to cedi, it gives an intention that it's going to be used here. I think that's the thinking behind it. So it's either going to be fully cash or capital goods. So if your investment is in the form of capital goods, computers and whatnot, if that is what your contribution, is, those have to be valued by customs, and valuation, an amount put on these items, and that will form part of your equity. If it's enough to satisfy your 500K, you don't need to inject any cash, right? Or you can have a combination of the two. But the critical thing that you ought to know is that if it's cash, it has to come from outside. If it's not coming from outside, it will not be considered as equity or investment for the purposes of GIPC.
Okay. Torah for Life, I hope that answers your question. But if you do have any follow-up, please do not hesitate to send your question through. I have a question here from a Dinkra Photography saying a friend wants to know what is a deed of conveyance and does it relate to buying property in Ghana? Mr. Hagan.
No, I think I'll defer to you on this.
Okay. So I guess if I get the question right, it is just talking about the conveyance, the deed that relates to the agreements that you have with whoever you're buying the land with from. So it can be your lease in a majority of cases, or it would be a freehold if you do buy it from an individual, as Mr. Hagan has said. So I hope that answers your question, Adinkra Photography.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, it could also be a sublease. A sublease,
yes,
obviously being a sub-interest from someone who holds
who owns a lease.
So, yeah, just so that,
yes, and I guess it is worth us touching on this aspect of subleases. So now it is going to be the case that, for instance, citizens will buy leases and they may sell it on to non-citizens. So they would have two options, either to assign, which is to give, well, if they have a longer lease than 50 years, then they can't assign. they would have to give subleases for 50 years to the non-citizens. And if they themselves have 50 years, then I guess they can assign those 50 years to the non-citizens. So it's another, I guess, education point for non-citizens acquiring land other than through the original sellers. So if you're not buying from the stool or from a family, but buying from somebody secondhand, as it were, then you have to be aware how these things can happen. You're most likely going to have a sublease if that person has more than 50 years, or you're going to have you can't get an assignment if that person has 50 years. So that is a point of education. I don't think we have any more questions, both on Facebook and YouTube and also on WhatsApp. So, Lawyer Hagan,
just one point. Whilst you were making your question of what you can acquire, whether it's sublease or assignment, it just came to mind that, with the new Land Act, talking about marriage, what comes to mind is, what if I'm a non-citizen and I'm married to a Ghanaian and I want to acquire land, as a result, and they want some practical tips on how to go about it. Because if you're buying the land as a non-citizen, there is that restriction, so what do you think should be? I think I'm actually interviewing now. What do you think should be?
That's fine. That's fine. It's a discussion. So practically, you can draft the lease in such a way that, for instance, you say Paa Kwesi Hagan, buying Paa Kwesi foreign on behalf of. So you're almost setting yourself as a trustee for a beneficiary who is either your wife or your husband, who is a non-citizen. But if the agreement does not mention the wife or the husband who is a non-citizen's name, the Act still provides for implied clauses into leases, which say that if even that happens, if a husband buys land and does not mention the wife's name, or the wife buys land and does not mention the husband's name, the other partner would still have a right, they have a beneficial interest in that property. So your name may not be on the agreement. So you have two options. Either through drafting, you get your name in the agreement as a beneficiary, but not as a legal owner, or you just sit tight and just rub your palms. And, as they're going through the transaction, you've got your 50% waiting for you. And whatever happens thereafter, I guess, is between you and your wife or husband.
That's an interesting take. So I think basically what we are saying is that, land acquisition can be complex, but with the right expert and information or professional, you should be able to navigate your way, to have a seamless process. So, critical thing is get your advice from the correct source, and then you should be fine.
Okay, thank you very much for those summarizing words, and you're very right. I think most often than not, we shy away from professional advice, and I have seen very heinous agreements drafted because people do not appreciate these laws. And I think a part of it as well is, for instance, your land surveyor would be giving you a lease agreement. And most often than not, they do not appreciate some of these things. But we have had a good discussion today, and we have pointed to the fact that a non-citizen can only own land for 50 years at any one time. That is the state of the law in Ghana. In that agreement, you can allow for a renewal. The law permits it. In that agreement, or whatever agreement you have, if you're married to a Ghanaian, it doesn't qualify you as a citizen. If you get into a partnership with a Ghanaian, it doesn't qualify you as a citizen. If you do set up a company as a non-citizen and you own more than 40% of the shares of that company, then it does not qualify as a citizen. So these are the things that I think for citizens, both citizens, because it would be the citizens who will be selling to the non-citizens, I guess for both parts, should be aware and be guided accordingly. And we have also touched on the difficulties that there would be if, for instance, you're on a visitor's visa or a temporal sort of visa and you're trying to acquire land in Ghana. Now, with the knowledge of the things that we've discussed today, of course, you can seek help and be guided accordingly so that you shall enjoy Ghana, and Ghanaians as well shall enjoy the company of the non-citizens who are allowed to acquire land and be with us by the laws that we have drafted. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you have already followed or liked our Facebook page or subscribed and liked our YouTube channel, then thank you very much. If you haven't, it is not too late. Please do like, follow, subscribe, set yourself reminders as well so that you can be reminded when we bring shows like this to you. If you do have any questions, our WhatsApp number is still active and could be used, anytime, even when we don't have shows. Thank you very much once again, and hope to see you next time.